Welcome to Hermeneutics Part 3. Now, just a quick recap. Video 1 dealt with what we can extract as a biblical truth about a person or figure in the Bible. And what I demonstrated was then that we could use various texts about the Bible to see what people thought about themselves, what others understood about them, what was true about them, and so forth, right? It was us using a wide testimony of scripture to understand characters rather than just how they're presented in one verse, but get the full picture of who that person is, the nuance, so to speak. Video 2 then basically delved into how it's a valid framework to conduct this type of hermeneutic or art of interpreting the Bible. I dealt with a Mormon who had basically told me that I can't use sparse, spread out verses in the Bible to justify something like a truth claim about the nature of God. But what I had gone and demonstrated was that it is possible to derive theology, claims about the nature of God from different places in scripture, right? Again, this is all about adopting a wide testimony, various statements about what is true. This video will build on that principle. But what we need to be able to do is categorize biblical truths. We have to be able to group the same kind of truths before building that bigger picture for ourselves based on the art of interpretation. So what I want to introduce to you guys in this video is a framework that I'm calling GCC. GCC is going to stand for genre, category, and context. And much like with when you watch a film or go to the cinema, genre informs what kind of film you're dealing with, what kind of literature, the tropes, the expectations, those things are laid out by genre. So similarly in the Bible, genre tells us what kind of text we're dealing with, right? Is it a prophecy? Is it a historical account? I mean, for example, you would not look at the books of Chronicles and Numbers for prophecies. You're going there to see what the historical accounts are, right? All the lineages, all the numbers, the stories, the leaders, etc. So prophecy, narrative, historical accounts, wisdom, poetry, all these different genres are going to deliver different kinds of truths. So coming to category then, it's just basically going to be a deeper level of genre. It's going to deal with the topic at hand or the subject matter once we've identified the genre. For example, if we're talking about a legal writing, right, if the genre of writing or text we're dealing with has to do with law, then category is going to talk to us about maybe things like dietary laws or laws of how to deal with a certain crime. Category could go into things like morality, prescriptiveness. What prescriptiveness is basically, you know, like when a doctor prescribes you medicine to take, do this thing so that you'll be better, you'll get well, right? Prescriptiveness from the Bible is going to deal with what we should do, and so it's going to deal with the kind of life a believer should lead, right? So prescriptive is also a category of writing. Then you also get into things such as ontology. And ontology is going to basically tell us about the nature of God, right? Ontology is part of theology, how we understand God. Soteriology, right? That's also a category of writing. Soteriology just deals with all things salvation, how we are saved, what those aspects are. Different things are going to be dealt with. Different subject matters will be dealt with when we understand category and what those truths are. So then the last C brings us to context. It's good and well that we can understand what's being spoken about, but we also need to understand who it's relevant for. I mean, you see it all over. People go to church and they quote Jeremiah 29 verse 11, for I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper, not to harm you, etc. But I mean, almost everyone who doesn't have a hermeneutical framework universally just goes and says, yes, God's talking to me with this verse right now. God's going to prosper my life right now. And we need to sometimes understand that we can't always hold ourselves to standards or apply truths to ourselves that are not always meant for us. We can build that big picture of truths, biblical truths, when we understand how to interpret, categorize, label, build on what's relevant to us as the audience. And so people who don't have a GCC framework, people who don't know how to exegete, interpret the Bible, will then misapply truths of the Bible to themselves. But people from outside the faith are going to judge us by truths that are not true for us, commands that are not relevant to us, and genre that doesn't deal with the Christian life. And so hermeneutics is actually so useful to us, because if we understand, especially when arguments from outside our faith come in towards us, what kinds of truths those arguments are dealing with, or what claims are being made about our faith, hermeneutics tells us which texts we have to deal with to address those arguments. One of the most prolific ones, of course, will be that, oh, Christians, you worship an evil God. Your God commanded genocide in the Bible. And so this argument or this critique, this criticism of our faith is obviously something that is aimed at the character of God. It's a negative statement about the kind of God we serve. But hermeneutically, when we look at the texts, all of the genocide or the wars surrounding the Amalekites are not about God's character. What we are dealing with, and there'll be three passages, right? We're going to go into 1 Samuel, we're going to go into Deuteronomy 25, we're going to go into Exodus 17. But what we're dealing with here, when we look at the texts that effectively underlie or encompass the Amalekite and Israelite saga, what's actually happening here is divine judgment. So we're dealing with a war narrative, and we're also dealing with the text of covenantal judgment. So the genre is a historical narrative. It's the record of Moses and then the Israelites moving out of Egypt during the Exodus and encountering the Amalekites. So it's packaged in historical narrative, but as a category, what it's dealing with is God's judgment. Deuteronomy 25 verse 17 says this: "Remember what the Amalekites did to you on the journey after you left Egypt. They met you along the way and attacked all your stragglers from behind when you were tired and weary. They did not fear God." And so when the Lord your God gives you rest from the enemies around you in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess, blot out the memory of Amalek under heaven. Do not forget. This verse here is actually a reminder to them. Listen, this command was given to you. This command is related to your exodus from Egypt because the Amalekites attacked you. Exodus 17, we see that the Israelites are coming out of Egypt, but this is a time of vulnerability for the Israelites. They've just escaped Egypt. They've been wandering through the desert. They think they're going to die. They don't see hope. And it's in this time, at Rephidim, Amalek came and fought against Israel. Moses said to Joshua, "Select some men and I will go fight against Amalek." And later in the same chapter, we see that the Lord then said to Moses, "Write this down on a scroll as a reminder and recite it to Joshua. I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek under heaven." Then Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, "Indeed, my hand is lifted up towards the Lord's throne. The Lord will be at war with Amalek from generation to generation." And so we see that this is God judging the Amalekites for what they did. It's because they attacked Israel on the Exodus. It's because they threatened God's covenant. God promised to bring Israel into a specific land, and Amalek attacked them at their weakest. The Amalekites attacked and ambushed them. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, Samuel speaks to Saul as he anoints him, and he says, "Samuel told Saul, 'The Lord sent me to anoint you as king over his people Israel. Now, listen to the words of the Lord. This is what the Lord of hosts says. I witnessed what the Amalekites did to the Israelites when they opposed them along the way as they were coming out of Egypt. Now, go and attack the Amalekites and completely destroy everything they have. Do not spare them.'" It's because the Lord saw what Amalek did. It's not because God is a bloodthirsty God. He promised that his hand would be against the Amalekites, but he's using the Israelites to effectively carry out said judgment. And so when we understand that this, from a contextual point of view, could never apply to us Christians because we were not the ones who underwent the Exodus. We were not the ones who traveled through Egypt, and we were not the ones who were attacked. So God doesn't need us to carry out any kind of divine genocidal judgment. This text doesn't deliver a truth about God in the way that the argument or the critique seems to be pointed at the nature of God. It's about justice. What happens to those who come against the nation that is protected within God's covenant? And so, hermeneutics helps us to disarm the argument. And so again, if we can utilize this framework of understanding, categorizing the kind of biblical truth being used, then any verses that are misapplied outside of their category, genre, and context in order to bring an argument against Christianity can be addressed. For example, those who oppose Trinitarian doctrine love to use the Shema Yisrael. Now, the Shema is what we find in Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Of course, this will be a text that many people use against the Trinitarian understanding of God where we call God triune, three persons in one divine essence, the Shema Israel is used very often to say, no, this verse is saying that God is one. I'm going to start out immediately by saying, yes, this verse affirms monotheism. This verse, within context, within genre, within category, is clearly affirming monotheism. But it is not an ontological text. It's not a text that tells you the nature of God, what God is, who God is, how God should be understood. And I can say this because Deuteronomy is a covenantal genre. That's the literature of Deuteronomy. It's speaking to the Israelites in the context of the covenant God has with them, the commands God has with them, the statutes, the instructions that God has given them as their covenant, as they move into the land promised to them already from the time of their forefathers. It's a covenantal text, but it is not an ontologically applicable text. It can't be used to combat the ontological claim that the Trinity makes about the nature of God. The Trinity agrees with Deuteronomy 6:4. We recognize only one God. This is not an issue for Trinitarianism. Now, to anyone who's actually going to disagree with this is again where the GCC framework comes in. We can look at Deuteronomy, the entire flow of it. The genre is covenant and legality. The category, the actual topic, the actual subject matter is what the Israelites need to stick to prosper and flourish. It's not about how God should be understood. It's about what they should do, the relationship they should have with God, the relationship they should have with their neighbors, as well as the gods of their neighbors. And of course, the context is quite easy. It's in light of the Exodus. It's the covenant they are being brought into with God as they exit Egypt. And so I'm going to back up the way that I'm explaining Deuteronomy 6:4 by demonstrating at a chapter by chapter level the themes being covered, because this will actually prove to us exactly what kind of context, what category, subject matter, etc. Deuteronomy 6:4 is being packaged in. Chapter 4's theme is telling the Israelites to not forget the covenant. It's Moses urging Israel to obey God's statutes and commands. It's him reminding them of the experience they had at Mount Sinai. Deuteronomy 4 verse 23. Take care, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God and make a carved image. They wouldn't be making a carved image if they remembered the covenant. Already that's showing that when God says, you shall have no other gods before me, it's part of the covenant. It's a command to not have those things. It's not saying God is this. It's saying, I am your only God. Allegiance to me alone. Have no other gods. And don't forget this covenant lest you make more carved images. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 5 will follow the same thread. It's going to be a reminder of the covenant that God made with the Israelites at the Sinai region. This time, it's just named Mount Horeb. But this is Moses bringing the 10 commandments to them. And so Deuteronomy 6 then, in context of chapter 4, in context of chapter 5, is going to bring us the Shema, the exclusive acknowledgement, worship of Yahweh. Deuteronomy chapter 7 continues this theme. It tells them what kind of relationship they must now have with their neighbors. It's moving away from the relationship they're having with deity, with God, as a oneness pact. It's moving into the relationship they have with other nations. And it even says, do not make a covenant with them. Why? Because they will turn your sons away from me. No truth is actually being delivered to us in how Deuteronomy's chapters are packaged so far, other than that the Israelites must continue to hold fast to these commands because they need to remember the covenant, not make other covenants, not be led away, not forget the Lord, not serve other idols. And so we can use genre, category, and context to dismantle the claim that the Shema, the Lord our God is one, is an anti-Trinity debunking verse. It's not. It's just a call to monotheism. And as Trinitarians, that's exactly what we affirm. Monotheism, one God. I hope that Hermeneutics continues to help you defend your faith, as well as spread the gospel when people have objections to the message of the good news. God bless, and stick around for the next one.